What's going on, Phenomenal Fatherhood family? This is a long time coming. I am super personally excited because this particular individual that I'm going to be interviewing today is just a phenomenal human being. He is a TED Talks speaker, motivational speaker. He has a work on your game framework. He has been able to, a former professional athlete, by the way, let me put some respect on it because there's a lot of people that play ball. There's not many people that play professionally, played 9 years overseas, helped a lot of people on YouTube, goes live every day on TikTok, and also was able to make a transition into business. How many athletes do we know that kind of stay stuck inside of a framework and an identity of playing ball, and then after that career is over, they're not able to make that transition? Well, Dre Baldwin is not one of those people. He's been able to not only make the transition, but make the transition in a way that's able to empower other athletes, empower other men, and empower a lot of other people out there. And if you don't follow him, make sure you follow him on TikTok, Instagram at Dre Baldwin. Be sure to check out workonyourgame.com. I'm somebody who has personally benefited from his books, his mindset, his motivation, and it's just a pleasure to have you. So being able to watch you grow as a father has been amazing. I've been watching you on Instagram for a long time, since before you got married, before you had your son. So my first question for you really is just, how has that changed your just overall perception of life, right? Just like when you have that child and you see it for the first time, you hold that baby in your arms, it's a different experience, you know what I mean? It's a whole different experience, especially for us men. So can you just talk a little bit about like how that has changed you as far as like your mentality?
Well, Tillman, first of all, thank you for having me here on the show, and I appreciate the introduction. Hopefully I can live up to everything that you said here. As far as your first question, how did it change me? I don't think it changed me radically that much. I think a lot of me was already prepared for fatherhood, being that by the time I had my kid, I was already older than most people when they had their first kid. I was 40 years old when I had my first child. I had already done so much mentoring and helping and sharing with males and females for so many years. Actually, one of the things I was thinking about was, man, I need to have kids so that I can get this game, all this stuff that I have, I can pass it off to somebody, that I can hand it off straight to them, and maybe they can keep it going. So it wasn't that I changed really that much when I became a father. I don't think that I did. And a lot of my mindset was already in the place where I wanted it to be. And a lot of the things that I'm doing, I was already doing. I was doing it to build something of value before I had a child. Now I have somebody who can see me doing it all the time. And that's really all it was, just a continuation of what I already had going.
I love that. And then you said something that I really wanted to touch on, because a lot of guys that I talk to in the Phenomenal Fatherhood, just guys I run across, a lot of them don't really think about their legacy or having a kids until they get a text that says I'm late, and you just mentioned the fact that you kind of already had that into your mind, like, you know what, maybe I need to go ahead and make that step so I can pass on my knowledge, I can pass on my habits, I can pass on the things that I have built. So what are some of the things that you did to prepare for that? Yeah.
As far as preparing for that, that was simply, again, same things I would do in business. So if I would just think, if I was talking to somebody who's 20 years old or 10 years old or 5 years old, and I want to teach them the things that I know that I think will be most valuable for them to know sooner than I found out, how would I package that? How would I put it together? How would I have them go through it? And that's the kind of stuff that I work on building all the time in my own business, because it can help me now. Even if I'm serving a client or somebody who gets into my world, somebody who wants to read one of my books or join a coaching program of mine, I can just ask myself, okay, all this stuff that I have, I throw everything at them, it may overwhelm them and they won't know where to start. But if I can codify it and put it into a system or a followable process, then it's easier for them to digest, and it helps them more, it helps me more, and everybody gets what they want to get. So it's the same thing I would do with a child. The difference with a child is that they're around all the time, so they get to pick up on things that you're not even trying to teach. So it's just making sure that you are upholding the image that you want the people around you, your kids, your family, etc. How do you want people to see you? Make sure that you're being that person at all times.
I love that. What do you think that has been like the toughest thing to adjust to after becoming a father?
Not getting sleep. That was probably the first thing.
For real?
Yeah, the first two. Right now, my son is almost 3. So I don't know when this is coming out. He might be 3 by the time this comes out. But the first 2.5, maybe the first 2 years, definitely the first 2 years, if your child is in the same bed as you, then it's really hard to get a full night of uninterrupted sleep. And I'm speaking from the male perspective. It's even worse for the mother, especially if she's breastfeeding. So that's probably the biggest adjustment out of everything for me. That was the biggest adjustment.
Yeah. I literally just was talking to a dad in Phenomenal Fatherhood this morning. I was like, how'd you sleep? He's like, man, I've been sleeping 2-3 hours a night for the past, since the baby got here, and the baby was born a month and a half early. So that was interesting. I had this idea prior to our meeting today. I'm going to go through each one of your books and then talk about how that particular book would be able to correlate or juxtaposition to fatherhood. So the first one's going to be the mental handbook. What would be like, I know this is mostly for sports life and with having a bulletproof mindset. What's something that people could take away from this particular book in relates to fatherhood?
Well, the biggest thing that the mental handbook is mental toughness. And mental toughness, I use sports as the frame there, but it's really just about being mentally tough, which is dealing with situations in life that are not what we wanted them to be or what we expected them to be, yet we still had to deal with it as it is. And then staying in your frame, meaning staying confident, staying disciplined, continuing to do the job, even though things may not be working out properly or expectedly right now in the moment. And, when you have a child, things happen unexpectedly. The child wakes up at 2 a.m. and you weren't expecting to be up, but now you're up. And you didn't get a full night of sleep, but you still have to go to work tomorrow. You still have a workout in the gym the next day, or you still need to be mentally sharp at the office. Whatever it is that you had to do, but your plans somehow, some way got interrupted. While in other aspects of life, let's say if something else interrupts you, let's say some idiot in your building pulls a fire alarm and you wake up at 2 a.m. That interruption is not the same as if your kid wakes up at 2 a.m. and you got your sleep interrupted the same way. But if it's your kid, then you really have no one to complain to in the bigger picture, maybe to your spouse. The woman can complain to the man, the man can complain to the woman. But other than that, who else are you going to complain to about that? It's your child. You chose to have the child. You chose to raise it. So you had to deal with it. Whereas if some random externality happens, let's say there's a fire alarm going off or the people next door are making a lot of noise and that wakes you up, you have someone to blame that on. You have someone to pin that on. Whereas in this situation, you just have to own it because it just is what it is. And interestingly enough, you said one of the dads in your community, he is sleeping 2-3 hours a night. Most human beings cannot actively function if they're only getting 2 or 3 hours a night of sleep. But as parents, when we're getting 2 or 3 hours a night of sleep, we still find a way to function. And that couldn't happen if anything else was causing us to not get sleep. But when it's our own children, we still find a way to make it happen. So it's one of those phenomenons, if you will, of humanity.
Would you say that from that standpoint, being that after you have the child, at least in my case, I think that once you realize that you can push yourself to that limit, that it has increased your mental toughness?
I would say yes. I've been in situations where I wasn't getting a lot of sleep before, not because of a child, but because maybe just my schedule and the way I was living and the way I was working, etc. But absolutely, because it shows you that there are things that you're capable of doing that had you not been pushed to have to do them, you would have never learned that you could do it.
Yep. I definitely, I tell people all the time, I don't think I would be where I'm at in business if it wasn't for my kids, because it definitely shed light on different attributes within myself that I probably wouldn't have pushed myself as far without the love of my kids driving me. And then I said, how can I copy paste this same type of mentality over to business, over to other things that I'm trying to achieve? You touched on something real quick before I move on to the next book, which was you chose to have that child, right? So I'm pretty sure you've seen this in Florida, Philly, different communities with dads of them just kind of like having a child and then not being available. What's something that you could say to those fathers out there that are kind of, in my opinion, just skipping out on their responsibilities and accountabilities like you were talking about this morning on TikTok? Sure.
You mentioned your kids. How old are your kids? How many
7, 8, 9, and 1 on the way.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. So as far as for those dads, you mean the dads who are kind of absent right now?
Correct.
Yeah, well, again, as you just mentioned, if you can make the child, then you are responsible for the child. The child's still there, whether you're around or not. That still is your child, and that child is still looking for you, even if you are not making yourself available. And at some point, most parents, even the ones who haven't been around, eventually come around to saying, damn, I wish I had spent that time with my son or my daughter. And they want to reconcile. And the longer you take or the longer the gap is between contact, the more resentment builds up, the less chance you have of making a real connection, and you can't get that time back. That's the most important thing with the child is that you can't get the time back of seeing them, as they say, take the proverbial first steps and learn the things that they learn and be the person who they become, the person who they're becoming if you're not around. And I've even had parents who I know who are older than me come to me and say, hey, they were around for their kids, but they were so focused on their career or their work that it seemed like they weren't around. So even though they were there, the relationship is not there because they weren't really putting real quality focused time into their kids, even though they were technically in the house. So it's just making sure that you're putting that relationship time in the same way you would with any other relationship. They all require time and focus.
Yep. And I know you love stats. So just to compound on that, if there's any dads that are watching this, they did a study of about, I can't remember, it was either 100 or 1,000 people in a nursing home. And out of the 100, let's just call it 100 people that was in the nursing home, they asked them what their biggest regret in life was. 76% of them, it had something to do with the lack of time, effort, or energy that they put into their children. So just chew on that if you're watching this. Next book, The Mirror of Motivation, baby. One of my favorites right here. The Self-Guide to Self-Discipline, which there's a ton of books on self-discipline, but I love the angle of is you versus you in the mirror. And at the end of the day, nobody can really discipline you because you have thoughts in between your head no matter what book you read. So if you can figure out the mirror of motivation, you can figure out what is that drives you. So how do you think that relates to fatherhood with the mirror of motivation?
Oh, that one is just all about the discipline, like you said. And it's about showing up and doing the job, whatever the job happens to be. And when you're a parent, there's a job. That's a whole 24-hour-a-day job. Even if you're technically not doing it at every moment, you're responsible for whoever is doing it. It's a 24-hour-a-day job that you take on top of everything else that you are already doing. So, or it replaces what you were already doing, which may be something that may not be so happy about. Let's say you got to give up your career because now you're raising a kid, or you can't do some of the leisure activities that you used to do because now you're responsible for your children, or you don't have your evenings to watch TV by yourself anymore because now the kids are around. So it's just a new job that you add on. You have to add it into the discipline of whatever you had going on in your life. It's not like you can easily just drop something that is essential when you have that kid. You still got to keep everything going all at the same time.
Yep. Have you been able to implement any systems or come up with any systems? I know you're a systems guy in terms of fatherhood. To keep. Yeah,
generally, I mean, even with my child, I still operate through the system. So right now I'm working, I'm not watching him. And in the evenings, I usually finish work by around 5 o'clock, somewhere between 5 and 6. And then I'm spending time with him for an hour or two. Usually we go outside somewhere. I'm in South Florida, so we have pretty good weather all year round. So I'm outside somewhere with him. Then on a weekend or on a holiday, I'll have more time with him, more in the morning, more in the evenings. And that becomes the system. Now, what we actually do, the system can change. Because, I mean, children grow. When they're young, you can push them around the stroller. Then they get older. They have ideas and things that they want to do. And as he gets older, I'm sure that will evolve over time. My system is just making sure that the time is being spent with him, whatever it is that he wants to do. So in the future, who knows? It might be he might want to do some of the stuff that I'm doing. Maybe he wants to sit and read a book. Maybe he wants to play a sport. So whatever it is that he wants to do, but as long as he knows and I know that I'm involved with whatever he's doing.
Yeah, and you know, the thing I love about that answer is that it's so simple yet so profound. I get a lot of questions about that, especially what is Kobe Bryant's hashtag? Girl dads. Yeah, so a lot of girl dads, and I usually have the same response. Kids spell love Time. It's literally that simple, especially when they're younger than 5 years old. So the next book is going to be an interesting one because this is the third day. As you know, after you have a child, the third day, the fourth day, your life is pretty much never the same. So we might need to change this one to the third year for kids, you know what I mean? But what would you say is in this book that could relate to fatherhood?
That's a really important one, especially in the early years when, like we talked about, not getting sleep. So if you're not getting sleep, you still have to get up when the alarm goes off and you still have to go to work, or you still got to get up when the kid gets up. So the kid gets up and has to go to the bathroom, or the kid pees on himself. The kid has to eat, and you're not feeling that good because you didn't get a lot of sleep the previous night. You were used to getting a full night of sleep before you had a child. You still have to show up and do what you're supposed to do. So that's what the third day is about. And the thing about the third day is that I get what you said there, Tillman, that the third day is a metaphor. It doesn't necessarily mean a day. A third day could be an hour. It could be a whole year. Your whole first year with a child. If that child's not sleeping a lot, that could be the third day. So it's a metaphorical thing, that time period when you don't feel great, but the job still has to be done.
Yep. That's parenting in a nutshell for sure. Now, this one's a little bit more tougher because this is an actual system manual, the Work on Your Game system manual. For those of y'all who don't know, this is how Dre used to show up to all his videos right here with the Work on Your Game cap and the proverbial tank top.
It was like that on the weekends.
When you get your running in. Yeah. But this is a lot about processes. So talk to us a little bit about how this one relates to fatherhood.
Well, it connects directly to a question you asked me earlier, Tillman, about how could I take what I've done up to this point, or maybe I asked it and you followed up. How could I take what I've done up to this point and package it in a way that someone else could learn from it? And that's the reason why I created that system manual, is basically taking what Work on Your Game is at a high level and systematically describing it to you, what it is, why it is, how it works, what it does, how you can get better at it, and how this can be implemented into your own life. So if someone doesn't know anything about Work on Your Game, they just want to know the foundational pieces, that's what's in that publication right there. It's just getting it all laid out on paper so that someone else could understand it.
And then how do you feel like that particular mindset can relate to like dads out there that are kind of like trying to figure out where to go?
It's creating that system. So as you mentioned, I often tell people that I tend to think in systems and formulas and processes. Looking at anything that I'm doing that I know I'm going to be doing over and over again, I know I'm going to be doing this again. How can I come up with a process that I can follow over and over and over again so it becomes duplicatable? I'm just by default, I tend to think in that way. So for parents out there, fathers specifically, it's what can you do over and over and over again? Because like you said, kids spell Time. So you know you're going to be spending time with your kids, or at least if you're committed to spending time with your kids, okay, what process can work so that I can do this? So I can tell myself, okay, I'll lock the office door so no child can come in here while I'm talking to you. But there is time when I am going to be around my kids and I am going to be available. How do I find that time? What is that time going to be? And can I do that on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday? What can I do all the time so I don't have this randomness in my schedule? I don't like randomness. I like knowing exactly what I'm going to do.
Yeah, that way you have like a set routine, and then it also frees up your decision-making bandwidth and your mental energy to be able to focus when you're actually at work and when you're actually spending time with your child, which is a big thing. Lately, you've been like really diving into the political sector, which has been really interesting to get your feedback and your mindset on that. How do you think that, I'm not really sure what your process is for preparing for those, but it seems as though you have a process because you always are kind of up to date with the latest information. How do you feel like just being tapped in with what's going on politically around the United States, where we live, has been able to help you as a father?
That's interesting. So interesting that you pointed out as well, because I've had a lot of people who've followed my work for a while notice that and point it out. So the thing is, when I talk about, it's not even necessarily politics, it's just current events, because sometimes I talk about things that are not political, but just something that's happening, like somebody's on trial or something happened in a basketball game. And I feel like the general public cares about it. The thing is, when you talk about something like personal and professional development, Tillman, like I do, that's actually my career focus, but a lot of people don't know that if they only see me on TikTok, is that you're only talking to about 2% of the population. Like most people are not interested in personal development and personal growth. Like I can see you behind you. I see one of my favorite books, The Law of Success, right there on your shelf. Most people are not interested in that type of stuff. So if I just talked about that, it's not that I would not have an audience. I mean, you found me, and from the basketball and then into that, but there's a lot fewer people interested in that. And at the same time, when you're talking about an evergreen topic, such as mindset, discipline, mental toughness, people can take it whenever they get it. They can get to it whenever they get to it because it's evergreen. But when you're talking about a current event, as if you've seen it in my live streams, which you have, you see that people get more activated to talk about a current event simply because it's happening right now. Yep. So I was talking about a mayoral election happening in New York. Everybody's talking about it today because it just happened. So if I talk about that subject, then a bunch more people are going to pay attention. Now, it's not just that I just want people paying attention just for the sake of paying attention, because what I actually do when I do those topics is I'm taking the same personal and professional development principles that I would talk about without the current event, and I'm just applying them to the current event. And I'm using the current event just to show you how I think and why I think about things and how I come to my principles. I'm just using the current event. So I really don't care about Democrat or Republican or this mayor in a town I don't even live in or this court case. I don't really care about those things. I'm just using them as material to show you how I am and how I talk and what I talk about, because I can reach more people if I talk about some big breaking news that happened last night. If I do that, then I'll get 500 people listening to me. But if I just talk about the principle without using the current event, I might only have 50 people. So it allows me to reach a bigger audience. It's just a strategy to reach a bigger audience. And of course, it's going to polarize some people, because when you say something about certain topics that people have really strong opinions on, of course, some people are going to agree, some people are going to disagree. But the good news is, a person like myself, I've been publishing content for literally 20 years. So there's nothing anybody can say to me in the comments that I haven't seen before. So I can take the comments as they come and read them and respond to them, and there's no problem for me. So the reason why I talk about the news items and the current events is because, number one, I am not affiliated with any of the organizations or groups or people that I'm talking about, so I can talk about them objectively, while at the same time, number two, mixing my personal theories and opinions in with the objective things that I share. And number three, responding to what other people had to say about it. And people like when you just acknowledge whatever they're saying in the comment or whatever, even if they're disagreeing with you, they just like being acknowledged. So that's a big thing in social media these days. People just want to be able to engage in some way, shape, or form. And I have no problem engaging, because I have a lot of experience doing it positively or negatively. And when it comes to your other question, how does this relate to fatherhood, is, well, my son's too young to understand what I'm talking about right now. But if he was to go back and watch everything, because everything's recorded, is he should understand that I am trying to, as objectively and as logically as possible, talk about things as I see them. Now, yes, my opinion is mixed in, but I'm also trying to be as objective as I can. And at the same time, my opinions are not chosen for me. I can have whatever opinion I want. And I even say that in my material, like whatever opinion you heard me say today, I can come out tomorrow and say the opposite, and it doesn't matter. Nobody can do anything to me. And that's the autonomy that I have because of the position that I've chosen in my life and my career, period. That's the bigger thing that I want people to get. A lot of times people don't get that part because they're so engaged with the topic, whatever it happens to be. But as I said, I don't really care about the topic. I'm just using the topic. This is just material for me. I'm not emotionally engaged in any of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Not to mention, it makes you just more aware of, like, you know, kind of what policies are being pushed through, and what's going to impact your son by the time, like, if they make a bill that's going to last for the next 20 years. Kind of some need to know information, you know what I mean? So one of the things that you said on your live, I want to say about 2 weeks ago, I thought was really, really important, that I get from a lot of younger guys, and that's the fact that, you know, when we grew up, it was like, hey, you know, I got a problem with such and such. We'll go meet at the cul-de-sac. We'll go meet behind such and such house. We're going to throw hands and we're going to squash it, and that's it. But nowadays, it's like everything is on camera. You got to be mindful of the fact that, you know, you could get put in jail behind somebody making a video. You don't even got to have the video really what happened anymore. You could literally upload it into an AI software and completely change what happened nowadays. So can you talk to that a little bit? Because I do get a lot of younger guys that they don't really comprehend that concept, especially my young 20-year-olds. Just speak on that a little bit, and why they should be cautious, especially when they have like a newborn, 1-year-old, things of that nature.
Yeah, we're in a new era. So the era that, how old are you?
30s.
Okay, so I usually do the cutoff around age 35. So people are around age 35 and up. We came from the era where we didn't even grow up with smartphones, and we didn't have social media. So for you to engage with another person, period, you either called them on the phone and there's a live voice conversation, or you waited till you saw them in person. Those are the only ways you could communicate with anybody. It wasn't, I mean, we had letters, you had the mail service, but mostly we weren't writing letters to each other. It was when we saw each other and when we talked on the phone. That was it. But there's another generation, people who are, let's say, even under age of 30, as you mentioned. They've grown up with access to social media and access to smartphones, where they can do a lot of their communication passively through a device, where you're communicating with someone, but you're not actually dealing with them in the flesh. And that can lead to, especially amongst males, people saying certain things through digital communication that you probably wouldn't say in a in-person communication. And then it becomes this disconnect, because if one person is operating by the quote unquote old school rules, I guess we would be considered old school, and then they're operating by the new school rules, but they're sending you energy that in the old school would require a certain response, or not require, lead to a certain response, but they're expecting a different response because in their era it doesn't matter. Now you get this conflict. And also at the same time, the world is just a little less, the world we're in today is less rugged, Tillman, and less rugged in that if two men have a altercation, that it never crossed my mind when I was in my even 30s, never crossed my mind that if two men have an altercation, let's say they have a fist fight or a scuffle in the mall, that somebody's going to call the cops. But nowadays, that's like the immediate response from a lot of men. I've seen it too many times to where now you got to kind of gauge who you're talking to, because people will talk in a way that they are looking for an altercation. But then as soon as the altercation happens, the first thing they want to do is not fight back, but try to get you in trouble through something else. What does that have to do with parenting is that, first of all, our kids need to understand that, and especially our young males, because men are more prone to turning things physical than women are. That's just biologically, by nature. And secondly, because us as men, we need to understand that anything that we do that puts us in a bad position, our kids are going to feel the brunt of that. So even if you say you get some misdemeanor charge for punching somebody in the face and you don't go to jail, but now, well, you go to jail, but you're in jail for a day. Now you got to pay a lawyer. Now you got to go to court. All those things are costing you money and they're costing you time, which are all things that could go to your kids. So these are all things that we got to keep in mind these days, and just keeping in mind who you're dealing with, where they're coming from, and what principles they're operating from. And on top of all of that is making sure that your kids have the proper principles in place themselves, because they're going to go out into the world at some point without you around, and they're going to have to make a decision about what to do about certain people and certain circumstances.
Yep. And then even when you speaking about like the cutoff at 35, like let's say 35 and younger, what have you seen has been like the biggest gap between 35 and younger males just in general, and how do you feel like you can help?
Just is a lot more passive aggressive. Again, the world that we're in today is just a lot, for lack of a better term, softer than the world that you and I grew up in. In those days, if two males had an issue, again, we couldn't handle it verbally, we handled it physically. And that was how it went. And everybody walked away from that and it was over. And then we moved on to the next thing. But nowadays, a lot of young males have been raised to not handle things physically. They handle things passively through a device. They can say things through a device. And then if you're held accountable in real life, quote unquote, from what you said on the device, a lot of people, again, they don't operate by the same rules as this is the same thing. What you said to me in a comment is the same thing as if you're saying it to my face. And a lot of people don't operate that way because there's often no accountability through the internet. So the way that this would apply for men out there today is that you just need to understand that not everyone is operating by the same rules. Even people who are over the age of 35 tend to operate, I've seen it, they tend to operate as if they're in their 20s, simply because maybe they spend a lot of time around those people, maybe they're trying to relate, or maybe they just decided, hey, I'm going to operate by the way that seems to be the wave or the popular or normal thing these days. I personally don't operate that way. And what I tell people, I don't say anything to anybody on the internet that I wouldn't say directly to their face. So you're not going to see me talking crazy to anybody on the internet. You don't see me in the comments on anybody's posts. I don't do any of that. I'll respond to things that people say, but I'll respond to them in a way that I would have no problem saying that to you if you were standing right in front of me. So that's the code that I operate by. But again, I turned 18 in the year 2000. I grew up in a world where everything was face to face. These new generation of people, and some people who are my age, but again, they may be operating as if they're a younger age, they are playing a different game.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah, and it's like one of the things that I try to caution men about too is that we live in a day and age where text messages can be brought up in court. You know, I'm somebody that's been through 2 custody battles and won 2 custody battles. So being able to have messages on DMs, being able to send text messages, being able to send all these different things that you have that are not face to face. Like, you know, we had to sit there and wait till you got home, talk on the house phone. They'd be like, hey, I'm going to be home at 7 o'clock. I'm going to ride my bike. Call me at like 7:05. And you had to make sure you was on point at 7:05 because when that phone rings, somebody else might pick up the phone in your household and you might be waiting for your friend to call so y'all can make plans for the weekend. So those text messages, those DMs, all the different ways that you can communicate online can all be screenshotted and brought up in court. And that's like a whole different ball game that a lot of these young guys might not be thinking about. Yeah, you might get hot for a second. Again, discipline, right? Being able to have the discipline to take a step back when you need to instead of just jumping into a situation or saying whatever you feel like comes to your mind. And then boom, 6, 9, 12 months later, it's being read by a judge with a DA sitting there typing up everything. And next thing you know, you're in a whole different situation that you never thought you would be, just because you overreacted at the moment. So that's why these mindsets, these frameworks, these principles that you live by are so important, even if people want to label them as old school. So I just wanted to drop that for all my young guys that send me messages and reply to the stuff we do for Phenomenal Fatherhood. Random question, like you talk a lot about the accomplishments that you've had through some of your books and use that as a framework as not to like brag, but more so as a framework to give people the idea of where you're coming from to connect with them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think has been your biggest accomplishment so far as a father?
Biggest accomplishment as a father is just being there consistently. I mean, my son, again, is not even 3 years old. So now I can take anything off his resume and hold it up myself, the way my parents could do maybe for myself and my sister. I would just say just being there consistently, my son knowing who I am, where I'm at, knowing when he's going to see me, and that's all I can go off of for now.
I thought it was going to be the curls, but yeah, that'll work.
He didn't get that from me. So no, it's not the curls.
What was the biggest lesson that you got from your father that you like are for sure, like, I got to pass this down to my son?
Well, it'd be the discipline. It was my dad worked a regular, quote unquote, regular job. He worked basically with his hands, factory type of work. I saw where I've been there many times. And his passion was music. So he would do music kind of as a side hustle, and he would do that after work. So the sacrifice there was sleep. So he wouldn't get a lot of sleep a lot of nights, because if you do music, usually music is at night, like 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock. And he's getting up at work at 4 or 5 in the morning so he can go to work. It's 9 to 5. And he worked outside of the city of Philadelphia, where I'm from. So he probably slept 4 or 5 hours a night most of his career, which was about 30 years, however long that was. And he never complained about it. And he never touted it like, hey, look at me, only sleeping this many hours and I'm still going to work. He never did any of that. He just showed up every single day and did the job. And as parents, as we talked about earlier, tell me, your kids are picking up on a lot of the things that you do, not necessarily just what you say to them. They just see what you do. So that's one of the biggest places where the discipline came from for me, was seeing my dad do that all the time, which I couldn't have explained when I was 19 what he was doing. But now looking back, I can see that's exactly what he was doing.
Yeah, definitely more is caught than taught. You know what
That's
I
right.
mean? You plan on having more?
We'll see. I mean, we're on the clock, but we'll see.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
Fair
I want
enough.
to, but we'll see if it happens.
Yeah, I'm about like 4 in, so I definitely like, you know what I'm saying?
Is that it for you, or you have more?
That's it, man.
That's it?
That's
Okay.
it, man. That is it. So we are done. You know, it was interesting though, because I found out on my late mother's birthday. So I was like, wow, you know, people often say like my first, I got a lot of books, a lot of gifts, a lot of letters, a lot of cards. And one of the things that was written on one of the cards was like, children are a blessing of a womb, treat them as such. And so it was a good reminder that it was on my late mother's birthday, and then boom, like I found that out. So I was like, wow, you know, it kind of reminded me about that saying that this lady from my old church had told me about.
That's great.
But yeah, so
How far along is your baby that's on the way? How far along?
we're just now coming up on the 3rd trimester.
Oh, it's pretty soon.
Yeah, and it's a boy
Okay.
too. So I got my oldest is a boy, just like you, and
Yeah.
then the 2 girls are in the middle, and then the bookend's about to be a boy too. So
Okay.
I was
Congrats.
like, "Ooh, Lord, come on, man! Just please let me hook me up with a boy, please, cause that'll be a
Congratulations.
lot in one household." So
Yes, it will. It sounds like it.
yeah, it'll be fun though. Got me a little basketball team running. Little
right.
start 5.
Yeah, that's right.
I was gonna ask you something else too. What was I talked about your dad. Is there anything in general that you wanted to share, like any gems as far as fatherhood goes?
No, I don't have that much experience to give any more gems besides what you asked, but I would say as a man in general, and as a father, because as a man, you're being watched, and men's role in society is to lead. And our role as leaders, especially when you're a father, is that you're leading even if you're not trying to, because your kids are watching you and they're going to emulate your behavior, even the stuff that you probably don't want them to emulate. So for men, it's keeping that in mind at all times, that you're always being watched, you're always being observed, your energy is being felt, and is going to get reflected back to you by your kids, because you are their first role model. You, and if you're a man, and you and the mom, y'all are their first role model, and they're going to pick up more from you too than they should be picking up from anybody else. So just be very cognizant of that at all times.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I tell people, especially fathers, prior to the baby being born, right? I'm trying to share as much as I can for this journey, because with my oldest, I wasn't in the process of making content, things of that nature. I was really a little bit more hesitant, but clean up those habits, read books like this prior to the baby getting here, because the thing that got me was that with my oldest, he was really young, and I remember I was coming home from work one day, and then he was watching like one of them kids shows that's probably not even around anymore. Anyway, the point is he laid back in the bed, and put both of his hands behind his head and like crossed his legs, like he's just like chilling like this. And I was like, wow. But he did it just like me. That was like my first inclination of like, okay, you got to be a little bit more on point with your habits, your mannerisms, your words, because they literally are little sponges picking up everything. So a lot of guys that might smoke or drink or be in drugs or just anything like that they may or may not be seeing, because a lot of guys think, oh, boy, my kid's not seeing me. Sometimes they still pick up on that habit even if they're not seeing you, which is wild. But clean that up while the baby's on the way. What are you working on next, and where can people find you?
Biggest thing working on now is really creating more of those systems, like what we talked about here, is turning Work on Your Game into a entity that stands on its own, whether I'm doing it or not, and turn it into a real system that we can get out into bigger entities, bigger companies, to where it's more enterprise level. So that's one of the biggest things I'm working on, just overall internally. Externally, for the people who are listening to this, we just reopened one of our group coaching programs called The Circle. That's probably the newest thing that we've done. Then on top of that, we're always just tweaking and updating and making sure that things are working the way that they need to be working, just figuring out how can we better systematize producing the kind of results that we want to produce. So we're always working on that. And the biggest thing that I do in Work on Your Game is help other people create systems to duplicate their success, the things that they want.
Gotcha. You got any more TED Talks in the works?
Not as of now, but often when you do a TED Talk, they tell you like many months before it happens. So if I'm going to, I would know several months in advance, but right now nothing's on the calendar.
Okay. Yeah, I might need your help with that. That's one of my dreams, is to have a TED Talk about fatherhood. I haven't seen any. I think I saw one, but it was mostly around like the science. It was like a science angle of fatherhood, parenting, that thing. But I want to get up there and talk about phenomenal fatherhood. So that's pretty cool. I think I was in one of your clubhouse rooms and somebody had said something about me being on there. I might be able to follow up with that lady. But anyway, we can talk about that offline sometime. And then I know that. So who would you say is this is a personal thing for me. Who would you say is your favorite basketball player today?
Players actively playing?
Yeah, actively.
Nobody. I don't really have anybody that initially comes to mind, not any single player.
Gotcha. I know you and I were both D-Wade fans.
Yeah, I like D-Wade.
I think I just really like Anthony Edwards' play. You know what I mean?
Okay.
He still got that dog. Like, he still has that. He got a couple more things to polish up for sure, and some teammates to get, but his mentality, the way he approaches the game and the way he plays, I like Anthony Edwards a lot.
Yeah, he's very good. I wouldn't call him again, I don't put anybody above anyone as far as the players playing today, but he is a very good player. I co-sign that.
For sure. Well, any final words before we sign off?
Just reminding everybody and the fathers out there that everybody has a game, and being a father is one of the games that you're in. So learn as much as you can, as Tillman said here, about knowing the game that you're in and how to play that game so you can best perform and raise your kids ideally the way that you want to raise them. And the better you play your game, the better your kids will turn out.
Facts. Also, real quick, for any of the expecting dads, I just made a video about this the other day. There's a really great podcast I was listening to about what to expect when you're expecting. And one of the gems that they dropped was that a lot of guys don't have the mentality when the woman is pregnant that you're in this together. And it made me think about the recent NBA finals and the championship. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of like a football team or a basketball team. Like, you kind of have a team and y'all are on one mission in order to birth a healthy baby. You know what I mean? At the end of the day. So, keep that mindset. Hopefully that helps somebody out there. Hope y'all enjoyed this podcast with my guy, Dre Baldwin, the legendary Dre Baldwin. You know what I mean? I probably have at least maybe 250 shares alone of like YouTube stuff, because I used to put all my teammates on it and stuff and everything. I used to be like, bro, let's just do this drill. Like, why reinvent the wheel? You know what I mean? Just get some cones. Go to Academy. I remember at one point we had like a chair, and then we would get like pieces of stuff. So like it'd be like a pen or like a book, because we didn't have the cones. You know, you don't got the money to get the cones. You just put something there. But that was really cool. So shout out to all the dads stepping up and being fathers. And remember, you don't have to be perfect to be phenomenal. Work on your game.
Excellent.